There is a particular kind of memory that refuses the ordinary rules of forgetting. Years pass, circumstances change entirely. You build a life with very little resemblance to the one where the hurt occurred. And still, without warning, a name, a phrase, a certain quality of silence brings the whole thing back with startling clarity, as though no time had passed at all. Why does an old wound sometimes feel more immediate than something that happened yesterday? Why does the mind seem to preserve certain pains with a precision it rarely offers anything else? Before we explore this together, subscribe to this channel where we uncover the hidden psychology behind everyday life. Picture a house where every room has been repainted, rearranged, lived in fully and completely except for one door at the end of a hallway that was never actually closed properly. You walk past it most days without noticing. But every so often, a draft moves through the gap, cool and unmistakable, and you remember, suddenly, that something in that room was never truly finished. Why does an unfinished room disturb the peace of an otherwise settled house? Because a house is only as steady as its most neglected corner. Carl Jung believed that psychological pain, when left unresolved, does not simply fade with time the way people often expect it to. It becomes, instead, a kind of unfinished material held in the unconscious, waiting not to be forgotten, but to be understood. What if the reason you cannot forget the person who hurt you has nothing to do with how significant they were, and everything to do with how incomplete the experience remained? Here is the deeper mechanism worth naming plainly. The mind does not release what it has not yet processed. Pain that was expressed, examined, and integrated tends to soften naturally with time. Pain that was suppressed, minimized, or never fully understood remains active not because you are weak or overly sentimental, but because your own psyche is still, quietly, trying to make sense of something it was never given the chance to finish. Why does this particular kind of hurt so often go unprocessed in the first place? Because in the moment it happened, most people are not equipped to sit with pain fully. Instead, they explain it away, minimize it to survive the immediate situation, or simply move forward because moving forward felt like the only available option at the time. The wound gets buried under the next obligation, the next distraction, the next reasonable excuse to avoid looking directly at it. Was it ever actually healed? Or was it simply set aside, waiting for a quieter moment to finally be addressed? Jung called the parts of experience we refuse to face directly the shadow, not only our darker impulses, but also our unresolved pain, our unintegrated grief, the parts of our story we have not yet fully metabolized. And here is the more uncomfortable truth worth sitting with. The person who hurt you may occupy far less of your actual memory than the unfinished feeling they left behind. It is rarely the person themselves who lingers. It is the incomplete emotional sentence they left you standing inside. Consider what that unfinished sentence might actually contain: an apology you never received and have been unconsciously waiting for ever since. A question about your own worth that the hurt seemed to answer incorrectly, and that answer has never been formally overturned. A version of yourself formed in that specific moment that has not yet been given the chance to grow beyond what happened to it. Is the memory really about them? Or is it about a part of you that got left behind in that exact moment, still waiting to be retrieved? Alfred Adler believed that early wounds often organize a private, lasting narrative about our own significance, and if a particular hurt was never examined and released, that narrative continues operating quietly in the background of every subsequent relationship, regardless of how much time has passed. Is the person you cannot forget actually haunting you? Or is the deeper, unresolved question they represent the thing you have not yet allowed yourself to answer? Picture the tree standing bare through winter, appearing from a distance like something finished, without depth. Beneath the surface, unseen, the roots continue their patient widening in the dark. Is the persistence of this memory truly evidence that you are stuck? Or is it instead evidence that some part of you is still quietly working, underground, toward a resolution that has not yet fully arrived? This is the turn worth making gently here. The fact that you have not forgotten does not mean you have failed to heal. It may mean, instead, that healing has not yet been completed, and completion, unlike forgetting, cannot be rushed or forced. Jung called this long, uneven process individuation not the erasure of what happened, but the full integration of its meaning into a self capable of carrying it without being ruled by it. Individuation, in this context, rarely feels like relief right away. It tends to feel, initially, like reopening something you had hoped was closed. Only later does it begin to feel like genuine release. So what do you do with a memory this persistent, this resistant to simply fading on its own? This is where the observer becomes essential, the quiet witness inside you, capable of noticing the memory's return without being fully pulled back into it. Not the part of you that relives the entire hurt every time it resurfaces, as though it were happening again in real time. The part that can simply notice, calmly, this memory has returned, and it is asking, once more, to finally be understood rather than avoided. Seneca often wrote that time alone does not heal wounds left unexamined, that a person can carry an old injury for decades, entirely unresolved, simply because it was never properly faced. Can you sit with the return of this memory and, instead of pushing it away again, ask honestly what it might still be trying to teach you? Can you offer it the attention it never received in the moment it was first created? And here is something worth noticing. If you look honestly, this particular memory has likely surfaced many times before, in different contexts, at different points in your life, each time asking the same quiet question in a slightly different form. Why does the mind seem to return to this same unfinished material again and again, rather than simply letting it dissolve with the passage of time alone? Jung believed that whatever remains unconscious in us tends to reappear in our lives as pattern, as recurrence, until it is finally examined consciously rather than repeatedly unconsciously relived. Perhaps this is not really about the specific person who hurt you all those years ago. Perhaps it is the newest return of an older, unfinished question. What did that experience actually teach you about your own worth, and have you ever truly answered it for yourself? Viktor Frankl believed that between what happens to a person and how they respond, a space exists, narrow, but entirely their own. You could not control what happened to you at the time, but the space between the memory's return and your response to it, choosing, finally, to examine it honestly rather than push it away once more, that space belongs entirely to you. So what would it actually look like to finally complete this unfinished process? Not something dramatic. Not a single confrontation with the person who caused the original harm. It might look like naming, clearly and honestly, what that experience actually took from you, rather than continuing to minimize it as something you should already be over. It might look like grieving, finally, a version of yourself that existed before the hurt occurred, rather than pretending she or he was never affected at all. It might look like recognizing that the answer the hurt seemed to give you about your own worth was never actually true, and choosing, deliberately, to overturn it. It might look like allowing the memory to visit occasionally, without needing to fight it off entirely, trusting that its visits will grow less frequent as the underlying wound finally receives the attention it was always asking for. None of this arrives with fanfare. Jung once suggested that people will do almost anything to avoid facing an old, unresolved wound, and if that is true, then simply choosing to sit with this memory honestly, rather than pushing it away again, may already be a significant act of courage. Return, for a moment, to that door at the end of the hallway, the one that was never quite closed properly. Imagine standing in front of it now, not to relive the original hurt all over again, but simply to finally close it with intention, examining what remains inside, acknowledging it honestly, and only then, deliberately, letting it rest. Does that make the draft disappear instantly? Perhaps not entirely. But does it mean the room is finally being tended to, rather than simply endured? Yes, and so we return to the question beneath this entire persistence, beneath every unexpected return of an old hurt. Every unfinished feeling still quietly asking to be resolved. What actually remains of you once this particular wound is finally fully understood? What remains when the person who hurt you no longer holds the unfinished part of your story? Because you have finally finished it yourself? Jung offered an answer that has outlasted him by nearly a century. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Perhaps you were never actually failing to forget. Perhaps some quieter, wiser part of you has simply been waiting, patiently, for you to finally give that old wound the attention it deserved all along. If this resonated, subscribe to this channel and join us as we keep uncovering these hidden truths. What is one memory you are only now beginning to fully understand, rather than simply carry? Write it in the comments below, and let that door, wherever it stands in you, finally close with the peace it was always waiting for.